Breaking news out of Iran that's going to shock you. In just 48 hours between January 8th and 9th, Iranian security forces massacred over 30,000 protesters in the streets. 30,000 people in 2 days. Right now, the USS Abraham Lincoln carrier strike group is positioned off Iran's coast, loaded with Tomahawk cruise missiles and over 75 fighter jets. Trump just told Iran they have 72 hours to surrender or face what he's calling speed and violence. This isn't a threat anymore. This is happening right now. Let me tell you what actually happened in Iran that the world is just now discovering. On December 28th, protests erupted across all 31 Iranian provinces. What started as shopkeepers complaining about inflation turned into the largest uprising since the 1979 Islamic Revolution. Millions flooded the streets demanding an end to the regime. Supreme Leader Khamenei gave one order: crush the protests by any means necessary. What happened next was a massacre on a scale we haven't seen in modern history. Security forces positioned snipers on rooftops. They fired directly into crowds. Hospitals in Tehran reported bodies stacked 3 high. One doctor told CNN they saw bodies piled up on each other in emergency rooms. Another hospital ran completely out of blood for transfusions. The Guardian reported that based on a network of 80 medical professionals across Iran, the death toll could exceed 30,000. Human rights activists documented 6,479 confirmed deaths, with another 17,091 under investigation. Iran cut the internet, blocked phone calls, created a total communications blackout so the world couldn't see what they were doing. Families couldn't find their relatives. Authorities buried bodies in mass graves far from where the killings occurred. They forced families to sign statements saying their children died as government supporters before releasing the bodies. This is where it gets serious. Trump drew 2 red lines for Iran. 1, stop the nuclear program. Allow inspectors back in. 2, stop massacring protesters. Iran crossed both lines. On January 28th, Trump posted this on Truth Social. A massive armada is heading to Iran. Like with Venezuela, it is ready, willing, and able to rapidly fulfill its mission with speed and violence if necessary. The USS Abraham Lincoln arrived in the Middle East on January 27th. This isn't just one ship. This is the largest U.S. naval deployment since the Iraq War. 3 Arleigh Burke destroyers carrying Tomahawk cruise missiles with 2,500-kilometer range. F-35 Lightning II stealth fighters. F-A-18 Super Hornets. EA-18G Growlers for electronic warfare. Over 125 aircraft total. Trump told reporters, "We have very big, very powerful ships sailing to Iran right now. It would be great if we didn't have to use them." But here's the thing. The New York Times just reported that Trump has been presented with a detailed list of military strike options, not hypothetical plans, actual targets, actual timelines. You need to understand what already happened in June 2025. On June 22nd, the U.S. and Israel launched Operation Midnight Hammer. They hit 3 of Iran's nuclear facilities, Fordo, Natanz, and Isfahan, 14 GBU-57 bunker buster bombs. Each one weighs 30,000 pounds. They're designed to penetrate 200 feet of concrete before detonating. B-2 Spirit stealth bombers carried them. Tomahawk missiles followed. F-35 and F-22 fighters entered Iranian airspace to draw out their air defenses. Iran's supreme leader called it a clear violation and vowed revenge. But he didn't retaliate. You know why? Because Iran was terrified. Their nuclear program was set back years. Their most secure facilities were obliterated. They realized the U.S. could strike anywhere in Iran at any time, and Iran couldn't stop it. But that was before the massacre, before 30,000 dead, before Trump's ultimatum. Now everything's changed. So what can Iran actually do? Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi said Friday, Iran is just as ready for negotiations as it is for war. Here's the problem. Iran doesn't have good options. Option 1, surrender. Allow IAEA inspectors back in. Dismantle the nuclear program. Accept Trump's terms. But if they do that, the regime loses all credibility. How do you tell your people you're a powerful Islamic republic while you're surrendering to America? Option 2, retaliate. Attack U.S. bases in the Middle East. Activate proxy forces, close the Strait of Hormuz, strike Israel. Iran threatened this week that U.S. military assets are within range of our medium-range missiles. Hezbollah warned of the bitterest forms of death. The Houthis threatened to resume attacks in the Red Sea. But here's the reality. If Iran attacks U.S. forces, Trump gets exactly what he wants: justification for massive retaliation. Option 3, stall. Offer to negotiate, but drag it out. Buy time to hide their nuclear program. That's what they tried in June 2025. They were in indirect talks while enriching uranium to 60% purity. The IAEA caught them. That's why the U.S. struck. Israeli intelligence chief Shlomi Binder was in Washington this week. He brought Netanyahu's presentation showing Iran is close to crossing the nuclear threshold. Netanyahu warned that if Iran is attacked, they'll face force never seen before. Here's what's actually on the table. Scenario 1, limited strikes, hit nuclear facilities again, target security forces who carried out the massacre, quick in, quick out. This is what Trump prefers. He likes surgical, targeted, dramatic, and decisive operations. No ground troops, just overwhelming air power. But there's a problem. Iran won't just sit there. They'll retaliate somehow. And then what? Scenario 2, leadership decapitation. Take out Supreme Leader Khamenei, target IRGC commanders, create a power vacuum. Trump literally posted Khamenei's location on social media saying, he is an easy target but is safe there. We are not going to take him out, at least not for now. That not for now is doing a lot of work. If Khamenei is killed, Iran could collapse into chaos. The Revolutionary Guard might seize power, or the regime might actually fall. Scenario 3, full-scale war, massive bombardment, regime change operation, ground forces if needed. This is the nightmare scenario. Regional war. Oil prices hit $200 per barrel. Iran activates every proxy. Hezbollah attacks Israel. The Houthis blockade the Red Sea. So where does this actually go? Here's what makes this situation absolutely terrifying. Every player in this game thinks they're in control, but nobody actually is. Saudi Arabia, UAE, Qatar, Oman, they're all begging Trump not to strike. They've refused airspace. They're terrified this turns into a regional inferno that burns their oil infrastructure to the ground. Turkey's Erdogan offered to play mediator. Iran's foreign minister said they're ready for talks. Sounds diplomatic, right? But here's the catch. Iran said negotiations can't include their defense capabilities. That means the nuclear program is off the table. That's exactly what Trump won't accept. It's literally his #1 demand. Trump told reporters Friday that Iran knows the deadline. He didn't say what it is publicly, but he confirmed. The message was delivered directly to Iranian leaders. Only they know for sure. Think about that. Trump is publicly saying there's a deadline, but he won't say what it is. That's psychological warfare. Iran's leadership is sitting in bunkers right now counting hours, not knowing if they have 24 hours or 72 hours before American bombs start falling. An Israeli researcher at Tel Aviv University's Institute for National Security Studies said this week, Iran's leadership is at its weakest point since 1979. There are more chances there would be a strike than that there will not be. Let that sink in. A former Mossad intelligence chief is saying a U.S. strike is more likely than not. But here's what nobody's talking about. What happens after the strike? If Trump hits Iran's nuclear sites again, Iran has to respond somehow. Their entire legitimacy depends on it. But if they respond, Trump escalates further. And then we're in a full war that nobody can control. If Trump goes for regime change and takes out Khamenei, there's no plan for what comes next. Marco Rubio admitted in testimony, there's no clear post-regime strategy. We could be creating a power vacuum that makes Syria look stable. If Iran collapses, the Revolutionary Guard might seize total control, or the country fragments into ethnic conflicts, or a civil war that makes 30,000 dead look like the beginning. Here's what you need to watch in the next 72 hours. First, oil prices. If they suddenly spike above $100 per barrel, global markets know something's coming. Traders get intelligence before the public does. Second, U.S. military movements. If B-2 bombers deploy toward Guam or Diego Garcia, if more destroyers enter the Persian Gulf, if tanker aircraft start positioning, that's the 24-hour warning. Third, Iran's rhetoric. If their supreme leader suddenly goes quiet, if state media stops broadcasting threats, it means they're preparing for impact. Fourth, Israeli actions. Netanyahu might not wait for Trump. If Israel strikes independently, that forces America's hand. We get dragged into a war we didn't start on a timeline we don't control. Fifth, the protesters. If demonstrations restart inside Iran despite the massacre, if millions flood the streets again, that could be the trigger Trump's waiting for. Maximum internal chaos plus external military pressure equals regime collapse. This is the most dangerous moment in U.S.-Iran relations since the revolution 47 years ago. 30,000 people massacred in 48 hours. The largest U.S. naval deployment since Iraq positioned offshore, nuclear facilities in the crosshairs, a deadline that's already ticking. The next few days will determine if this ends with diplomacy or war, if Iran's regime survives or collapses, if the Middle East stays relatively stable or explodes into a conflict that pulls in Turkey, Israel, Saudi Arabia, and forces the entire world to choose sides. One thing is certain. Iran's time is running out, and the world is about to find out if Trump is bluffing or if those carrier-launched Tomahawks are about to fly. The Armada is in position. The targets are locked. The countdown has begun. What happens next will reshape the entire Middle East for the next generation.